Unsee the future.
It's the question I ask every week. Do we really? Shall we do this, gang? All right, let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Unsee the Future, the Hopeychattybits with me. It's only Timo Peach. How are you, sausage? It is the podcast in which I meet artists, solarpunks, and changemakers, reimagining the stories we think we're in. How are you feeling this week as you consider trying to change the story that you are in? Honestly, I feel increasingly helpless at being able to change a thing about mine. And so this journey is, in a way, a very honest one of mine, meeting people who are practicing ways to get on and do that. It's from lots of different perspectives, from high and low business, from everyday life, and thinking also very big. And I'm extremely pleased to have my guest join me today for this 6th episode. Who is my guest today? She is Senior Vice President for Sustainability Solutions at the global engineering brand Wood. She's co-founder of UN Global Compact, the SDG Ambition. She's a World Economic Forum advisor on climate governance. She's the co-founder of the New Zero World campaign, and she is the author of science fiction, A Starship for Enterprise Innovation. Are you seeing why I'm getting her on? She is a mentor, a speaker, and an advisor to business and organizations on tech and social governance around the world. She sits on the World Humanitarian Forum's Tech for Good board, along with numerous other board positions, championing thinking found in the intersection of innovation, impact leadership, and sustainability and social justice. She works with people at the highest levels of corporate responsibility, trying to help them connect to the possibilities of transformation. But she came to a realization that the creative storytelling of science fiction could help more global leaders picture alternative futures. She says the most important question to ask ourselves when we look at gender equality, for example, is whether we are solving gender equality challenges based on the past, the present, or the future. And she also says, activate your science fiction mindset and change the world. It's my great pleasure to welcome to Unsee the Future, Ann Rosenberg. Welcome to the show, Ann. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. What an introduction.
And honestly, it is a fraction of the things I could have said about you. Now, before we go any further, it is, of course, 9 a.m. in LA. It is midday noon in New York. It is 5 o'clock tea time in Bournemouth. Where in the world are you?
So I'm in LA. I live in LA. I live in, I think, the best place you can be when you work with a science fiction mindset. I call it the La La Land.
You do?
Yeah.
Yes, that's a very good place. But we'll come to how you got there. I think I'd like to start by asking you about how you got into this, because you said to me that you come from a very conservative engineering sector, and you learned a lot from your time at SAP. So you know a lot about corporate systems and how that culture thinks. To begin with, how did you awaken to the challenges of sustainability?
So I like when you say the awakening, because I don't think it didn't come to me it wasn't like an awakening. And I had the opportunity to move to Silicon Valley for around 8-9 years ago, and was part of this whole singularity movement, exponential thinking. And it was at the time where, you had all the many exponential technologies really becoming key for how we were building and working with innovation, and the whole thing about design thinking. So you could say the creativity accelerated. And then I had the opportunity to move to New York, a little bit around when the 17 Global Goals was introduced by UN. And I've been working with innovation all around the world for many years, using the principles of innovation out of Silicon Valley. But when I was asked to move to New York and build up a big innovation space, I always look at like, what is the soul of the city? And the soul of New York City, because you have the headquarters of UN there, is of course impact. And then my awakeness came where I also became really embarrassed, you can say, because I've been in technology now for more than 22 years. And so you can say I have not historically been thinking about sustainability and impact. But when I understood the magic of technology, and you can do anything you want with technology today, and the obligation we have to work and build solutions, that was where I begin to see that, and that was my awakeness into that anything you do with technology, you need to do for good. And so I think around 6-7 years ago, I began to understand the responsibility we have as human being where we build businesses, build solutions.
Did people around you share that? Did you have a moment when you walked into your office in slow motion at SAP thinking everything looks different, or was it a slow thing? Did others follow it with you? Did you feel alone? What was the experience like at that point?
I think it was very slow. So I write a lot of books, and when I was in Silicon Valley, that was where I got my understanding about open innovation, because that's what defines Silicon Valley. This is what I call Innovation 1.0. And then I began to, together with a company called Startup Guide, we began to build, like, write books around the world about the soul of innovations. And I realized innovation is not just in Silicon Valley, it's happening everywhere in the world. That's what I call Innovation 2.0, distributed innovation. And then Innovation 3.0 is where I realized, okay, hold a moment. Why do we innovate? What are we trying to achieve? What are we building, right? And I realized that we were innovating without having a bigger purpose, a bigger ambition, a bigger reason and obligation. And that is where, when I moved to New York, and this is what I call Innovation 3.0, is that when you innovate, is that you need to do it for purpose. So anything you do, you need to do it for a higher cause, a higher good cause.
And that can guide your design thinking better, can't it?
It guides you toward, it's the principles for what you design.
But we think, I often use this lazy phrase that we live in a kind of cult of engineering, and Silicon Valley is the front end of that, where everybody thinks they love innovation and things that happen there trickle down. But does anyone really want innovation? Bosses will say, oh yeah, we must have some innovation, but do they really? How do you find inculcating change of any sort to people in corporate spaces?
I love that question, because I remember I was always the awkward person before I moved to Silicon Valley, because I'm the type of person who generate a lot of ideas, and not everybody appreciate that, because it gives a lot of disruption, right? And people are always like, oh yeah, you have so many ideas, but do you really execute it? And I always execute my ideas. So when I came to Silicon Valley, I realized there was many people like me. And I always said to people, I have a secret backpack. Nobody can see my backpack, but in my backpack, all my ideas is. And maybe the idea is not for right now. Maybe it's for a later moment. I will never forget it. And then I will pull it up, and then I will execute on it, right? And that's the philosophy that you live and breathe in Silicon Valley. I remember I always thought every single day in Silicon Valley was, when I lived there, best place in the world to live, is that, the hardest thing was that every day you generated so many ideas, because you lived in an environment where everybody does that, that you wanted to initiate something every single day, right? But I agree, you have what you call the people who get fueled by that, and then you have people who feel this is great, but it's also very disruptive, right?
It is. It is, and it also sounds tiring. I kind of I want to sit down after I've spoken with you, because you get so many ideas buzzing through me, and you've done so much. Your CV is incredibly rich and impressive. You're very doish, and that must cost you in energy. How do you recharge yourself at a very human level? You're working at high level stuff, generating a lot of ideas. How do you reconnect with the earth yourself?
I think that a person said to me, just like, when people love to do extreme sport, that kind of like that, which is important for some people. I'm the person who like extreme way of using my mind, like thinking ideas. So I think that's actually how I, that's how I relax. That's how I work, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for me is to be surrounded by people who share that.
Right.
For me, what is very tiring is if people kind of say, no, 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 can't do, can't do, can't do.
Right.
Where I see it, but it's not just about creating ideas. For me, it's also about executing the ideas and see the impact by that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit like when people ask me how I keep being creative. Well, it's what energizes me. So, I have to make myself stop doing some things. But you must get no quite a lot. Although you bring a lot of energy and make people enthuse people, you must get working at you do at high level in corporate life. That you're in the heart of the world machine with all its problems, and it's very engineered problems, and you understand them, but you must get people resistant to change and hard to do that.
I think that for people like you and I who kind of get energized by generating ideas, we are at a really key moment right now where even the most conservative corporates, companies, and people who are very linear thinking are being challenged, because when we now work with the whole digitalization of the energy sector, for example, or we solve the big issues that we have in front of us around climate or any of the 17 global goals. This is not a linear approach, and people have realized this. People are pledging for goals that need to be fulfilled, and they do need to be fulfilled, right? There's no way around it, by 2030, by 2040, by 2050. And so you can say the entrepreneurship have never been more important to activate in every single person. I mean, and
Yes.
so I think
Love
that the
that.
whole world is being shaked up on that right now. So I think I don't feel the push as I did before,
Yeah.
because there is an urgency around us.
Yeah, an urgency that is creating a great era of innovation and opportunity. Now, as a way of getting to the kind of central theme I'm so excited to talk to you about, you're making me think that the challenge here is one of transition. And I've long thought that we can't afford, and I mean that literally, we can't afford to leave anyone out of the design process. And at one end, that means really rethinking all our bad habits about who we do and don't invite around the design table at the beginning, and how to listen to them and make them feel welcome into the whole process. But at the other end, there are those who are right in the corporate world, up in the World Economic Forum, up at the highest levels. You go to Davos and mix with all that lot. There's a lot of people who be cynical about that. And, you work for a big global engineering firm, Wood PLC. They talk a really good game about sustainability. They're still winning accounts in the Middle East to help facilitate ongoing oil and gas stuff in Saudi Arabia and others. How do you, as Senior Vice President for Sustainability and a creative human, how do you synthesize transition in your role and put those things together for that company and for yourself?
So when I came to Silicon Valley for this around 9 years ago, Silicon Valley was a place where a lot of corporation had like outlets. And it was in those outlets that you discussed the innovation ideas. And then they were seeded back into the big corporations that the company had around the world.
Yeah.
Today, this has been decentralized. So when you go into big corporation today, whatever is Wood or SAP, where I worked before, you have your own internal entrepreneurship program inside the company. You collaborate with accelerate and startups. You have venture companies. You have a venture side of your company. So the copper world have actually built up today, I will say, like a very innovative culture.
Right.
And if you go into World Economic Forum, for example, they have a huge innovation. They have thought leadership innovation. work a lot with the different venture arm of corporations and accelerators and so on. So I would say the last 8 years, what we saw in Silicon Valley has now really been injected into organizations themselves. Of course, when I was SAP, I was responsible for SAP's university network, where we had 3,500 universities. So this, you could call it the network of network, where universities are linked to accelerators and corporations and venture companies and government. So there's this huge network. And I will say the last 2 years, public-private partnership has become key. I will say this: the world have shifted. People have come. I think, especially COVID, have educated us on that you cannot isolate it, solve issues only in partnerships.
You cannot isolate the issues. You can only do it in partnerships. Yeah, I agree with that. I think you and I have come, very interestingly, to some similar viewpoints from very different starting points. Now, I am a bit of a science fiction nerd, and when I'm with my nerd mates, I feel like I'm not qualified nearly enough to be a nerd. They're all so smart. But around a lot of other people, I would be a sci-fi nerd. You're not. And yet we've met on this idea that science fiction can be a massive way to reframe the future. How did you arrive at that?
So you're totally right. It was around, what is it now, 5 years ago, my first year in New York. Not a science fiction fan at all, did not watch science fiction movies. Of course, love startup acceleration, innovation, recently lived in Silicon Valley into New York, but was not in those circles at all. And then I was asked by UN to go and speak at an event in Europe. And it was about the fourth industry revolution, and Sophia the robot was sitting next to me. Right. And with at that time and today, it's very normal, right? And we were sitting, have a conversation together with some other panelists, and I traveled back to New York, and my husband, he put on the Westworld, and not the new Westworld, but the first Westworld
with Yul Brynner in it from the 70s.
1972. Yes. And sometimes, I'm the type of person who see patterns. I see things and I stop up and I think, what's going on here? So I was sitting there, and normally I would just not really watch it, but because I just had Sophia the robot next to me,
right next
and
to you,
they looked like her, and I was beginning to counting the years and how in the world did they know? It doesn't make sense. And then that was on a Sunday, and then on the Monday, Singularity University had an event in New York that I went to, and there was a boot camp about science fiction thinking. So at that time, I was running a big innovation space at Hudson Yards, in the High Line in New York.
Right.
And my team and I came up and I said, you guys, you might think that I'm crazy, but listen here. This is Monday evening. We had a meetup that evening. The rest of the week, we're going to see maximum science fiction movies. And then we are going to see if we can find correlations to something that we know exists today. Just like I saw Sophia the robot and I saw Westworld.
Yes.
And so we put up this huge document where there were so many things that science fiction writers or science fiction movies has been talking about for the last 100 years that actually exist today, right? And some of the Star Trek, the flip flow, you know a lot of examples. And then I was like, okay, there's something going on. And I would say one other thing that sparked this moment was that I was in the process of getting my green card. And I was sitting on Manhattan down in the, and I had this green card doctor appointment. And they had this funny enough, big screen where there was Charlie Chaplin from 1928. You probably remember Charlie Chaplin in 1928. He had this thing, he doesn't speak, it's all mimics, right? And it's called the modern machine, and he's sitting and getting feeded, right?
Yeah.
And so from Sophia the robot to Westworld to Charlie Chaplin 1928, and doing that exercise about looking at correlation, I realized there's something going on here. So I started writing a book that actually became a history book. This is the book here.
Yes, it is.
Not that big. Yes, exactly. And also probably a little bit too early for my time. It came out It came out of World Economic Forum 1 year before COVID, so that's like 3 years ago. And it's been interesting because we were running a lot of boot camps at Hudson Yard, and you kind of think that the people that will come to stuff like this is mainly new type of startup and accelerators, but it was not. It was people that who has a love and passion, and some call it scenario planning. You can call science fiction thinking scenario planning, right? But it's all about looking into the future. It's like a time traveling thing that you do. Yeah. So the book has a methodology where you imagine that, what is really funny, the book actually, that was before all the pledges. The book talks about you are in 20, there are two exercises. You are in 2030 and you are in 2050. This is 3 years ago I wrote about this. And you think back where you are today, and then you begin to figuring out how to build the future, right? Yes. And what is interesting about this is that when we all are looking at what is happening so that's the reason why we have the biggest sci-fi moment right now. This is the book also concluded this and say, science fiction thinking has not been created to create science fiction movies. We love that. But has been created for the time we live in today to help us to build solutions to solve the big issues we have in front of us, right? You can talk about COVID. You can talk about the climate crisis, right? And if you look at CEOs, and going back to your first question about, but conservative companies, corporate companies, big CEOs, they are literally coming up today with pledges where they're saying, I'm committing this company to be net zero by 2050. That is a science fiction moment, because of course that person nobody knows. That person don't know how to do that. Yeah. That is historically. So I think that, to your point before, we live in the biggest science fiction moment of the time right now. Mm-hmm. And it's when you and I met, you had no idea that I was into this, because there was no conversation was about. And the last half year, people have been reaching out to me because it looks like the time is now to speak about this and have some conversation about it. But I will say, I probably took, because every person have a sci-fi in themselves. And it's funny that I live in LA now, because the book also predicts that LA will become the most important place to help the world with this mindset. And it is because when you are in LA, of course, not just people living in LA, but the soul of LA is this, as I call it, the la la land. It is like, you are allowed to think like this. It's okay to think like this, right? That's interesting, yes. Because at the same time, the challenge that LA has got is that it's industry. It's business, like every other business that you've been part of, in the sense that they have particular goals. We've got an economic system that wants shareholders to be blessed rather than ordinary nobodies. And it's a lot safer business to churn out nostalgia and look backwards. And so our challenge, as I identify, is that our science fiction has been showing us lots of things that can go wrong. But over the last 40 years, it's been terrible at showing us things that could go right, and doing what you're suggesting, which is go to the future and bring back artifacts, as Julian Bleeker said last week from the Near Future Laboratory, also in LA. Going to the future that you want, bring back an artifact and look at the humanity of it. What does it imply? How do you think La La Land can get much better at those more Wakanda-like futures, or different futures to the ones we've been taught? I think so. In the book, I have like this. It's like a formula in the book that you need to use because we don't. So the whole thing I spoke about, like innovation 1, 2, and 3 is right here, right? Yeah. And then there is like this. It's like it's kind of saying that you need to take science fiction thinking. You need to take the UN Global Goals for Sustainable Development, and exponential thinking is equal to innovation 4.0. So you can say, what is super key for how we are going to help the world to go through this difficult time we are in today, and to become net zero by 2050, and all the things that we need to do to build a better humanity. It needs to be with the ambition of the 17 global goals. As you said before, It is your design principles. When you build a business, when you transform a business, it needs to be like this. But the thing is that you can't use the linear thinking. You need to have this more like, it's like accelerating your innovation mindset. And it's interesting because right today, actually here in LA, we have the LA NFT, where you are seeing right now the whole metaverse, NFTs, and Web 3.0 is becoming, I would say, it's beginning to become mainstream.
Yeah.
And that, and again, this is a whole new, you can say, technology mindset. But again, everything we design there need again to be to support humanity, right?
Yes.
Technology for good in any kind of contrast that we're doing it. And the role of LA is that because LA, the film industry, and the way of thinking and the way of imagining, normally in the corporate world, you don't imagine. You're not allowed to. I mean,
wow, that's a quote,
right? But this is what we need to do now, and
yes.
That's the reason why you go into an industry like the film industry, and that mindset you bring it into the corporate industry. So
yes.
This book that I wrote is not, I mean, people who love science fiction are allowed to read it, but it's really for the corporate world, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an implication to things like the metaverse. It's Web 3.0 as we're being sold it is just more of the same. Only now, you're going to have crappy JPEGs thrown at you in the street. How there's a whole sort of creative, I would say, art mentality that needs injecting into there, so that we don't hide in the metaverse, we don't hide in Second Life, we don't run away from the soil and the problems, but we use this sort of stuff to say, what if? Is there a mindset in Silicon Valley amongst billionaire business people? Are they energized by this? Does it ring with their humanity when you talk about it? Can you see their eyes light up?
Yeah. And I was just at South by Southwest, and it's kind of like the whole world have gone 360 now on the metaverse and NFTs and Web 3.0 for as like in a mainstream way. Yes, I definitely see that the people who are living that world, it's key that they do it with sustainability and impact.
Yeah.
And that means that when you build a metaverse and you act in a metaverse setting, or you're building an NFT or work with the NFTs, or building solution with the distributed ledger with the Web 3.0 platform, it is important that, again, you do it for good. So you can say, if you go back to the design principle, whatever you operate in the metaverse, whatever you operate, you're building a business in Web 2.0, Web 3.0, whatever you do, design principle is always based on the ESG and SDGs, always.
And that's the framework, isn't it? And yeah. Science fiction led me to the SDGs as well. Is there I mean, for you, is there a science fiction story that points to design good, or how to do a good future? Is there a story that's especially resonated with you and think to picture the future closer to what you want?
I think that one still needs to be told. I think that I'm part of an institute that you also talked about, which is called, with the global brain, which is called the New Zero Worlds, where we are going to really, we are using the ESGs as the core design principles, and so there's both about the new narratives. There's like we are capturing a lot of film footage we talk the new heroes. AY, as you know, is one of them, where he has the battery tour, how he's influenced the whole music industry.
My colleague AY Young from the Global Goals Music Roadshow, whose birthday it is today, by the way.
His birthday today, yes. So I think that, and I'm also part of another institute which is called the ESG. It's a big entrepreneurship sports generation, where we had last year, we had 600,000 startups that work on solutions for the 17 global goals.
Yeah.
And we are also bringing that into the metaverse. So I think that you will see, that's what my mission is on with the metaverse and then NFTs and Web 3.0 is, let us not repeat, let us learn from the past and build technology for good, right? So we build it in with the right intentions. But that's also my feeling. What is going on? I mean, I'm excited about the next 3 days to see what's going to be the big conversations. And the following week, you have the big cryptocurrency event in Miami going on, right? So I will say to all the listeners, I mean, if you're not in that space yet, get involved. I'm not saying that you should leave the Web 2.0 world. I'm saying that you are seeing a bridging happening now, which I also think why science fiction. I mean, what I'm excited about, I've been waiting for this moment. I know you have too, that science fiction thinking is becoming mainstream. I think it's happening now, right?
Oh, it really has changed from when I was a kid. Yeah, it's not nerdy now. It's just accepted storytelling.
Yeah.
In fact, the way I fell into this was I came from an artist, and because I've always liked science fiction, and a lot of those who follow me as the artist Momo Tempo also like science fiction. I just thought it was a no-brainer to take my amigos into space and explore the themes of sci-fi. And as I sat with all the big themes of science fiction and started writing songs around these different stories, there was a question in my head that just wouldn't go away. It got louder and louder. And that is, which of these futures is the most likely? Now, sci-fi doesn't predict it. It's more like what if, isn't it? But I found myself in a slightly different way to you, but not so dissimilar. I made a book. It isn't officially published, but I just wanted to get it down into this kind of document that felt more like I knew I wasn't just making an album of music. I knew I'd be making a sort of an experience called The Shape of Things to Hum. And I hummed and hawed and wrote the music for this, and felt that it was that what we can do from these stories of all the mistakes is simply learn from them. And so I went on to make it into a live experience where we too imagined that the audience was in the future. How did we get here? Well, we taught ourselves all these other futures and chose a different one. Which led me to the subject of solarpunk and an actual alternative future that I'd not heard of until a few years ago. Is that a word you've come across much in your conversations?
I wouldn't say I have, but I will also say that, I don't know, I think a lot of things that I would say the talk that you and I have right now will be a little bit crazy talk if you go a little bit back in time.
Yeah.
Now it is a needed talk. So I think that we probably begin to hear it more and more going forwards. And I love what you talked about, like, because I think that is happening. I had a talk this morning about, we are scoping out how we would do the metaverse with this big entrepreneurship sports generation, about should we create our own metaverse? Should we be part of other metaverses? This whole thing about what metaverse do you want to be part of? What world do you want to be part of? Which is crazy to think about, right?
Yeah.
So I think the talk that you and I have now, the question you just asked me, will become normal talk going forward. I'm actually heading over in 2 hours where female quotient, Shelley Salas.
Yes, you were talking with them at South by Southwest, weren't you?
Yeah, exactly. They are launching, they're the biggest private women movement in the world, and they are launching their female quotient lounge in the metaverse, right? So yeah, I think we are going into a mainstream moment soon with this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously you've championed female voices in tech and some of the most basic ways that equity is missing from a lot of business thinking, and still at the top of a lot of engineering firms, it's blokes and it's white blokes still running it. There's a lot of sort of things to try and run through there. But I'm interested in how you think Indigenous voices, as well as female voices from anywhere but the global north, can get around design tables with the rest of us. How can we learn from them? What are the doors that can open to them to come and sit in the UN or sit in Silicon Valley or come to Davos? How's that unfolding? Actually being able to hear those different perspectives and stories.
So the initiative that I'm part of, the New Zero World, is exactly around that, where I mean, first of all, UN have always been a place that capture everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, but the thing about UN is that how do we make sure that the world see that?
Yeah.
That become the norm for how we design things. And
Yes.
so the New Zero Worlds, at COP, we captured a lot of footage, and we showed it in one of your other programs, where we had those voices speaking, and I think it goes back to how we design the design principles, who we invite to the table, how we include people. One of my key design principles for everything that I do is that everything I design and a part of need to be affordable, accessible, and scalable.
Right.
Because if it is not, it's not for everybody. Everything you do every single day needs to be for everybody. Otherwise, you're not inclusive, right?
Affordable, accessible, and scalable. Yeah, good. Yeah. In a way, talking with the UN and working with them as you do, the Global Compact accelerator that you helped to found, to try and get corporate thinking much more clued up with the SDGs, a useful framework I've spoken about a lot. You know, the UN is a lot like the system it's trying to help, in that it's sort of technocratic, and I would go as far as saying the UN is creatively illiterate. I'm being rude there, but culturally it doesn't know how to put art into things, and I wonder how we unlock that. To me, that art is the missing SDG. It's the one that unlocks all the others, because it's concerned with the way we see things, and all the others are kind of, well, here's the job, here's all the problems, and it's a very useful framework. But how do we start putting art thinking right into the middle of our sustainability hopes, do you think?
So for me, UN is holding, you could say, so when people ask me, who do you work for? I say I work for UN, even though I don't work for UN, but I work with for the UN principle. So the UN is holding the 17 global goals.
Yes.
And whatever you have in your backpack, you support that mission. That's how I see it.
I like that.
So if you take AY with his battery tour, who is a youth ambassador for UN, he used the music, and UN give him like you can say empowerment, but of course UN are not going to write the music.
No,
you'll be writing the music. So I think that UN, I see you, they are holding the common denominator for the world, showing us the direction and the ambition where we need to go. But we as human being, we need to, in a you could say, in a collective way, come together, whatever we are, in art, music. My husband is a photographer,
right,
and he do a lot of impact storytelling with his pictures, right?
Yes, yeah.
So it's more or less like we all have an obligation. My side is technology, so I work with technology for good.
Yeah.
And so I do what I can do based on my universe, and he do what he can do with his universe, right?
Yeah. What you have in your backpack, I love it, and also the very positive view of the UN holding space. It's holding space for these ideas, and that is why I still believe that we need the UN. It's just the UN's part of the world's challenge to that we have a world machine to turn inside out. You mentioned Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. Wow, how prescient that is from 100 years ago nearly. That's still the problem we've got, isn't it? To get out of the machine. Wow, that was visionary, and how slow we are to change.
Yeah, but and that's funny, because with the book here, it actually turned out to become it's a history book.
Right.
And that's why I also want to, I'm just like you, a person who get very easily excited and love innovation.
Yes.
But if you go 100 years back, there are people like us who work with innovation and optimistic mindsets. But at that time, in the end, I always talk about the Maslow's pyramid. It's like the fundamental thing in life that we need to make sure works, right? So for 100 years ago, with the book also talk about, we had it was kind of funny. I saw an old movie the other day, and I actually saw that there was too many horses in New York City, right? So what happened? The car came around. Now there are too many cars in New York City. So what's going to come around, right? So you can say at any point of time in history, we have had breaking moments where big innovation came around, and that is so I think science fiction is equally important today as it was 100 years ago. The difference is just that we have technology in a way we didn't have 100 years ago. Then we had something else, but the history is repeating itself, definitely repeating itself. Yeah,
it is, but it's more like what I'm learning. You're making me think of something I've been learning recently more and more, that life repeats, but it doesn't. It spirals. We're spiraling through the universe, and so when you come around, you're not actually coming around again. You're coming sort of round forward. And I found in my personal life, when something drops into my life, it might look really random with what's led up to it, but coming around the spiral forward, I'll pick it up again and go, that's what that's for. And I think that's how life works. We're corkscrewing through the universe, and now we're coming back to these issues, but we're a network species. We're fundamentally a different creature because of Web 2.0 and all the craziness. This feels like a moment, doesn't it, in history?
I think it is a moment in history. I think the moment that we just came out of, like, we are still coming out of COVID, Web 3.0 is becoming massive. The climate crisis is real. I think we as human beings has, I think because of COVID, and of course now we have what's going on in Ukraine and with Russia. I think there is a moment in time now where it will go definitely in many ways into history, what's going on right now, but and with COVID. But I think that I remember Bill Gates write about this in his book, about we are at a moment in time where we are going to see the biggest innovation of our time at this point. Of course, there'll be other moments like this, like 100 years into the future or 200 years into the future, but it is a specific moment we are in right now. Yeah.
It feels like it, doesn't it? Do you feel, and do people around you, when you do go to the bigger meetings, and everybody's on meeting tracks, and you go to here and you go there, and it was quite doish, I know, at these events. I've been to plenty of them. But do they feel optimism through the middle of what's happening? The climate crisis is getting worse with the data by the day. Things look more and more inevitable. Old stories are now really producing psychodrama across the world and challenging energy security. This is a big and dumb question, but to get out of bed and be excited as you do you see threads of light through this, or is that not how you work?
I think that people need to be realistic. So when people, for example, say, why can I not measure my emission, right? Emission 1, 2, 3. Why can't I do that? Or why have I not built a business or solutions or products that is designed around ESG? Why don't I have that? There's a reason for that, because we historically, if you go back in time and you look at how we build businesses or how we do investment, or you look at project management philosophies or Six Sigma Lean or all of that good stuff, that and management consulting philosophies and so on, all of that did not include sustainability.
No, weirdly.
And the way you were leading, like, when you went to executive MBA programs, the whole school system, it was not part of the curriculum. Okay. No. Fair. And I know from coming from the enterprise software business, historically, we did not build solutions around that. It was not part of how we did it. So now we realize the urgency for this. And that's the reason why I'm optimistic to see how companies, how CEOs is committed, how countries are committed, how technology companies are building solutions, how consultant companies are driving transformation and transitions, and how universities around the world. I mean, if you go to Denmark, middle school, kindergartens, universities, they all teach on the SDGs, right?
Yeah.
The role that UN plays today, I am optimistic to see how fast this has been possible to ramp this up. That's why, but I'm also realistic, because if you look at the energy sector, for example, right? The energy sector is one of the sectors that has not been digitalized. It comes from a very old tradition way to work with energy resources. And to go in and digitalize, not digitalize an industry is one thing, but digitalize an industry that has so many, you can say, connections into every daily situations of companies and people's life and so on. So it's core things. Of course, it's a massive change and it will take time. And there was a great report coming out about, if you look at hydrogen, which is one of the more mature new energy resources. I mean, we need to understand that some of the energy resources that we are looking into, many of them actually are mainly in prototyping, are not ready for mainstream. And so when people get negative around this, I'm like, but look at it for 2 seconds. The reason why is that we haven't focused on it before. It's like that's why I love history. I want people to look and say, what were our focus for 10 years ago, 5 years ago, right? Why did we do what we did? And then don't just, I believe in magic, I believe in science fiction thinking, but I'm also realistic about the things do take time to do, right?
I totally agree. You're making me think of, well, I mean, firstly, government is much like the energy sector, and it's very slow to digitize. And it's not just, your implication is it's not just the tech, it's digital culture. It's thinking in a more connected way. We're very slow. Never mind then jumping into the super connected vision of sustainability. But you make me think of a theme and idea that my lovely wife Caroline is exploring in a book, Imperfect Sustainability. It's a sort of silent watchword over everything I do with Unsee the Future, because we haven't published it yet. But it's that idea that we have to come with the rucksack we've got, to use your language. We have to come with all the imperfections and all the complexity of who we are as people, and make a start anyway, and feel that we're allowed to. So I agree with you that where you and I might still be not exactly being run down by the climate crisis, we can still think straight. We still have water working in our taps. We still have food. We can think straight enough to see that there's some freaking exciting things trying to happen. I agree. I have one more question for you before we end. And I ask all my guests this. It's the idea of leaving an ancestral artifact. This could be an object, symbolic. It could be an idea, a notion, a poem, or something. If you were to leave something forward to future generations to share from your heart now, or from your work, or a wish for them, what would it be?
I think it would be a statement of, if I should do it today and I should bury it, it should be a statement of where the world is today. Because again, back to the history, we tend, and I think that's what this book here learned me a lot, because we tend to just, we should do that. Look at what is the next thing, what is the next thing, what is the next thing. And that we tend to forget that there's so much we can learn from. Remember, my science fiction activation came because I saw Charlie Chaplin. And I saw Westworld. So I think like being allowed to write down right now, and that's why I applaud people who do documentary and films, who write about the life we live, the moment we are in right now. And it's super important for the generation to come to understand that, because there's so much to learn from it. When I think about the metaverse, I'm excited to see Nike just came out with how successful they are operating in the metaverse. But right now you can say, what does it mean to, and there has been an attempt before to do the metaverse, but I think the time is potentially now to get that to work. But what does it mean? So when we go into 20, 50, 40 years into the future, the understanding of the moment we are in right now, I think it's what. So I think it will probably, if you ask me to right now, I'll sit down and write about today. This is the date. It's AY's birthday. No, today's the date.
It is.
And we are on our way, hopefully out of COVID. We are seeing that the Web 3.0 is really beginning to accelerate. We have a climate crisis in front of us, and what's going on, of course, in Russia and Ukraine, and this is the moment, and just like the moment when I wrote this book and I went back in my research and saw that, what happened in the beginning in New York City, there was too many horses. I think because I think the strengths as we have a human being to understand the world we live in is reflection. We need to reflect and understand.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what I would do. History is super important to understand the world we live in and where we come from. Yeah.
Yes. And that's how we reflect back into heritage to reflect forward in our hopes.
Yeah. And you never know. Remember to see the sci-fi movie, not the evil science fiction movie, but the good science fiction movie. You never know if you see something there that become really important for you going forward. You never know, right? So that's why I'm telling people, don't just watch the science fiction movie. Learn from what you see.
Yeah. Wonderful thoughts. Ann Rosenberg, it's been a tremendous honor to have you on with me, sharing your thoughts from your experience. Thank you for joining me on the Hopeychattybits.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Unsee the future. That ability to reflect, What Ann is talking about there is emotional truth, and that she's finding in all the circles she's moving in circles you might be very cynical about in ordinary life, a humanity trying to emerge, people trying to connect with emotional truth. That is the job of storytelling. I can't help thinking of a film like Silent Running, and that's been a watchword over me for years. And watching it again, it's quite harrowing, actually, because I feel we're steps closer to that. The idea, if you've not seen it, that all of the natural world is put into space sort of in an arc, but nobody cares about it. And eventually the logistics company wants the spaceships back, so they just throw all the nature into space. Gosh, are we on a pivot between a knife edge between transcendence and collapse, as the solarpunks would put it. A huge thanks to Ann there. I do urge you to check out her TED Talk, go back and find out all that she did. A Starship for Enterprise Innovation. Activate your science fiction thinking, everyone. Do check that out, and I'll put the links down on the page here to all her work and what she's up to. A fascinating person, talking to so many people. What energy. We need those of us who've still got the ability to hold space, to use that holding space to reflect and think about what if. I think our futures depend on it. This isn't just a fantasy of the rich. You and I have got to hold space for what futures we want, and then move in and embody them. Now, you can find all the foundational episodes of Unsee the Future's idiosyncratic style of research, exploring the big themes of our era of crisis, along with all previous Hopeychattybits at unseethefuture.com. There you can also find exclusive previews of the new book from my findings that I am indeed writing. UTF, How to Think Like an Artist and Change the World. 9 practices of art that can help you imagine the story you think you're in, reimagine it. Now, you can encourage me if you'd like to by becoming a Momo Amigo and joining the Unsee the Future mailers. And you can find out all about me as a music artist at momotempo.co. Go and dive into the crazy pocket universe that is my creative context. You will love it. What story do you think you are in? And are you figuring out yet how to change it? Let's encourage the more hopeful human tomorrow. Thank you, Sausage. See you next time.
How much you want to be? We'll rule the galaxy. How much you want to get?